Hello and welcome back to Wellsbourne. Next Monday the 29th of March, the current round of COVID lockdown restrictions are due to be relaxed and recreational flying will be permitted for either solo pilots or with members of their same household bubble. For me that means solo, as the only time I ever attempted to fly with my household bubble, it very nearly ended in divorce. Now the last time I flew for real was on the 5th of January, so that'll be a gap of 83 days, just within the flying club's limit of 3 months, but only just, and long enough to get risky. To help mitigate the risk, I've arranged two things. Firstly, a pre-flight ground briefing from our CFI Ray, and secondly, this practice flight using Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. I've already performed and recorded this flight, and I'm adding the commentary afterwards, so I can assess my performance realistically, warts and all. And there are several, I'm afraid. The first being that I forgot to start with the flaps lowered. However, in real life, I'd have picked this up during the pre-flight walk around. So let's get on and start the engine. And I've set the altimeter to QNH, which for Wellsbourne means that we've got about 150 feet starting. Switch on the radio to 124.030, and then the second mistake I made was to forget to switch the transponder on to standby. Again, it's not life-threatening, but it just goes to show how easy it is to forget things when attempting to do them from memory rather than the checklist. So my objectives in this flight are as follows. I'm going to take off and climb to 3,000 feet in the area just south of Long Marston, where I'll practice some general handling procedures such as stalls and steep turns. Following this, a PFL, a practice forced landing. I'll then return to the airfield at 2,000 feet above ground level to carry an overhead join, descending on the dead side to join the circuit at 1,000 feet on the downwind leg. I'll then make 3 approaches and landings, the first one using normal full flaps, then a second flapless approach, and finally a glide approach following a simulated engine failure on the downwind leg. Now another mistake I made was to do the engine run up at 1900 revs instead of 1700. Don't know why I did that, but there you are, this goes to show. And the idea is not to switch the engine off completely. But at least the 152's been modified, so it now idles at a reasonable speed. It used to be far too fast, so I always got told off when I was taxiing past the tower. So one final point is I'm not going to record any RT on this flight, because I'm not sure whether the tower will be operating or not. What I'm actually hoping to do is video the actual flight and then recreate it as a split-screen real-life versus flight sim video. I'm not sure how well this will work out at this stage, but watch this space. So at this point I would call ready for departure if there was a tower operational or Wellsbourne traffic lining up runway 18. Right, final pre-takeoff check, make sure the DI is aligned to the compass. And full throttle. Check we've got full engine revs, T's and P's are in the green, and airspeed is increasing. At about 55 knots, start to rotate, and climb out at about 65 to 70 knots. I'm following this flight on Skydemsman, so I can now see that we've passed Loxley, so I can now commence a flight, a gentle turn to the right, heading out towards Long Marston. Climbing to 3,000 feet, which is the minimum altitude that we attempt to do any manoeuvres at. Well, we're coming up towards 3,000 feet now, so I'll just do a top of climb free to check. So F, fuel on and sufficient for the sortie. R, radio on and tuned to Wellsbourne. Transponder tuned 7,000 and halt. E, engine T's and P's are good, electrics are charging. D, direction indicator is aligned to the compass. And altitude we're set to the Wellsbourne QNH, coming up to just over 30,000 feet. I would normally do a carburetor check, but since we've been climbing out at full power, we don't need to do that at this stage. So now I'm levelling off at just over 3,000 feet, and we'll perform some stalls. So the first stall will be a fully developed stall in the clean configuration. There's Long Marston Airfield just over to the right. Right, carb heat on. Okay, and then throttle right back. And then hold the nose up, increasingly more and more back pressure on the yoke to keep the altitude constant, and the airspeed of course is dropping off. And there's the stall warner going off, and let it develop into a full stall. And there it goes. And actually it dropped a wing, which is the first time I've ever done that. Okay, so carb heat cold, full throttle. And we actually dropped quite about 400 feet there, so that was not very good. Okay, so then we'll do another stall in the landing configuration with full flaps. So this time we'll try and hold the stall at the just before it develops into a full stall, and see if we can recover without losing any loss of height. Just going to turn to the south a little bit to keep clear of Long Marston. Okay, so we're back to 3,000 feet. Carb heat. Throttle back once it's into the white zone, then we can apply full flaps. 1 stage, 2 stage, and 3 stages flap. Then throttle back, hold it off, and wait for the stall warner. There it goes. And now recover. Okay, drag flaps off. Airspeed okay, and then take the remaining flaps off. So that worked alright, it didn't lose any appreciable altitude, and that's what you do on a landing approach if you are accidentally distracted and the stall warner went off. The next thing I'm going to do is some steep turns. Try and do 45-degree turns to the left, have a quick look around, make sure there's nobody else in the vicinity. And again this time the idea is to avoid any loss of height during a full 360-degree turn. So now we're going to the turn, and in fact that's not too bad, that's about 60 degrees, so that's good. What of course you don't get in the simulator is the effect of the extra gravity. At 60 degrees you get one additional G force on you, and that really makes the blood rush away from your head. You feel quite light-headed. So that was alright. I did a full 360 degree from south to south. Now we'll do the same thing to the right. And it's a 60-degree bank pretty well, I think. And that's fine. Yeah, I was quite pleased with those. Those worked out quite well. Do those in real life. Good. I noticed that I had my carb heat still on, so that was a mistake, because I shouldn't have done that. Now I'll put the carb heat on, and now we're going to do a PFL, so we pretend that the engine has died. And the first thing is to fly the airplane. So we want to set it up to about 65 knots, which is the best glide angle. So let's aviate. Once we've done that, we navigate, so see if we can find a suitable field for making a forced landing in. We've got plenty of height, so there's a bit of time. Okay, and we'll do a few checks here, so make sure the fuel is on. We've got the carburetor heat, and we'll check the mags, make sure that it's not the failure of one mag that's causing the problem. No, it's not a mag's problem, so it really is a problem. So now we'll look for a suitable field, and if at that time I would make an RT call, a mayday call. Which would be something like this: Mayday, 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 Golf Bravo, Whiskey November Bravo, engine failure just south of Long Marston, landing in a field. Remember not to press the transmitting button whilst you're doing it, of course. Now there's a suitable field, so we'll aim for that one. I think that looks quite a nice field actually. It looks right kind of shape, reasonably flat, and no crops, so that's the kind of thing you're looking for. Just warm the engine a little bit, stop the practice. Right, so now we can make that, we'll put some flaps in. Full flap. And we can descend. And I'm fairly confident that I could make this field, so now we can abort the PFL. Drag flaps off, full throttle, carb cold, and climb out. Positive rate, take flaps off. So yeah, that was alright. So what I'm going to do now is return to the airfield. At the same time, I'm going to climb to 2,000 feet. In practice, I would ask the tower for the QFE setting, which is the pressure altitude to give me height above the ground level. In the absence of that, I would just reduce the altitude by 150 feet, which will bring us back to approximately ground level at Wellsbourne. Right, we're nearly back at Wellsbourne. We're approaching at 2,000 feet on the QFE, and we're assuming that the runway in use is still 18 with the right-handed circuit. So we're going to approach on the left-hand end of the runway, crossing virtually over the Vulcan, and then we'll start the descent at 2,000 feet over the airfield, descending over the dead side, which is over the town of Wellsbourne. It's the opposite side to the circuit. Lost height a little bit, we need to be back up to 2,000 feet. Make sure that we've got plenty of clearance between ourselves and the circuit traffic, which will be 1,000 feet. Okay, so we throttle back, we've got carb heat on, and there's the airfield below us. Descending now on the dead side, we'd report overhead, descending dead side. And the great thing about an overhead join is it gives you such a wonderful view of the entire airfield, so you can see any traffic that's taking off, and by listening out you can hear of anything that's in the circuit. So you get a really good picture of the entire airfield, and it's a really good join procedure. One thing that I always do as often as possible. There are some airfields where you can't do overhead joins, Duxford for example, because they say that there are high energy aerobatics likely to take place in the overhead, so no overhead joins are permitted there. So we're now on the crosswind leg at 1,000 feet, so we go back up to normal cruise revs. We normally need to go out about a mile from the runway, which at 90 knots is about 40 seconds. So I sometimes just count to 40 or to about 35 and then start the turn. Now any traffic that would be in the circuit would be approaching at this altitude from the left hand side, so we have a very good look to the left. Make sure there's no traffic already on the downwind, and then we'll perform the turn onto downwind. Now on the downwind leg, there's the airfield off to the right. And here you would perform your bumpy check, so it's brakes off, undercarriage down, Mixture rich, fuel on and sufficient for a go round. Instruments check, carburetor heat on. I make a downwind call. Downwind 18 right hand circuit for touch and go. Again, I'm still watching this on Sky Demon, so I can tell when we get to the turning point, which is about now. So we throttle back to 1500 revs, hold the nose up to let the speed drop off, then put in the first 2 stages of flap, and let the speed decay to about 65 knots, which it does naturally. Now the turn is slightly more than 90 degrees, so we're actually pointing back toward the airfield. And the great thing about that is we can see the runway on our right hand side. There it is. So we can use that as a reference and line up fairly accurately. And commencing the turn now onto the final. And having said all that, I still managed to overshoot, don't know why. Perhaps there was a bit of wind, although I thought I would set it for 0 wind. So we're offset a little bit, but not a great deal. So now we put in full flap. Probably need to increase the revs to compensate for the extra drag and make a final call. .65 knots. Pretty stabilised approach, I think. Wee bit on the high side, 2 whites, but that's alright. I think that's changed to 1 white and 1 red now. So that's good. Quite happy with that. Runway is clear. Dropped a little bit lower than I would like there, just in case there's a double decker coming along the road. Throttle right back. And bam, wasn't too bad. Right, carb heat cold, flaps off, and 1, and 2, and 3, and then back to full revs. Good revs, P&P is good, and we're airborne. So that's the first approach, which was normal approach. Now the second one I'm going to do is a flapless approach, which is the same, but we have to go a little bit faster, so we come in about 70 knots. Right, we're pretty well at the turning point now, so it's the same procedure as last time. Carb heat hot. Throttle back, but no flaps this time. And we also make the leg a little bit squarer, so it just gives us a bit more room on final, because of course it's a much shallower approach than with flaps. There's the runway over there to the right. Now turn on to final. Still no flaps. This is a lot shallower approach. And I'm still overshot. Don't know why I do that. Okay, so this time we want to come in with approach speed of about 70 knots, so it's a bit faster. I actually like a flapless approach. I do find it much easier in the flare. But you have to allow for the extra float, so you can't do it with a short runway. You need plenty of runway. And flare. And float. And we're down. It's good. This time carb heat cold, no need to wait for the flaps. Full throttle. So that's 2 successful touch and goes. Take off again. Oops, engine failure after takeoff. Right, now we have to think about it. We haven't much time. So first thing is to get into the optimum glide, which is about 65 knots, and then aim for the best fuel we can, plus or minus 30 degrees of straight ahead. Never attempt to go back. That looks reasonable. I think we'll be alright with that. So we'll finish that one. Practice, we'd have to let air traffic control know that we were going to do that. Okay, we're back at 1,000 feet. Turn onto the downwind leg. A bit high this time, let's come down a bit. Oh, what on earth? Oh no, that's 3 engine failures in one sortie. That's a bit much. Anyway, so the first thing you do is turn towards the airfield. Don't mess about. Get straight turn in there. Trim for 65 knots, which is the optimum glide speed. There's the airfield off to the right, so that's good. So we're aiming now for the downwind end of the runway, not too far downwind. But it's better to overshoot at low speed than undershoot at high speed. No flaps as yet until we're confident of making the runway. Watching the speed very carefully to make sure we don't let the speed drop off too much. We'll do the turn now to the right. Once we're confident of making the runway, then we can introduce the flaps. And full flaps really steepens the angle of descent. And that's fine. We're going to use up plenty of runway, but we've got quite a lot there to go at, so we're fine. And that's down, quite successful, so I'm quite pleased with that on the whole. Made a few mistakes, but nothing life-threatening, I don't think. But no doubt some of my colleagues will advise otherwise. Exiting via 2-3. Laps up, car peak code, and a nice trundle back to the flying school. Absolutely fabulous scenery now, thanks to Flying Feston. I accidentally took it off the other day and saw what it used to be like, and it was atrocious compared to what it is now. And a recent addition is that he's put John's Piper Aztec in, and also the Cessna Citation, so that's a really good addition. So here we are coming back to the flying school. Thanks for watching, and I'll let you know how I go on next Monday. The only thing I would say is the grass needs a cut, Kim. Okay. Back to 1700 to clear the plugs. Back to 1200, mixture off. Switch off, radio off, transponder off. And switches off. Okay, bye for now.